Binge recaps here. Today I am going to explain a movie called Dune. Watch out for spoilers. The story opens with a lady telling a piece of her kin's set of experiences on the desert planet, Arrakis. The lady, Chani, is a Fremen. She makes sense of that since before she was conceived the planet has been governed by the brutal Harkonnens who have developed colossally rich gathering the psychogenic substance, melange, otherwise called the flavor. The Fremen have been attempting to oust the Harkonnens, yet without much of any result. As of late, in any case, the Padishah Sovereign Shaddam IV has requested the Harkonnens to leave Arrakis. Chani ponders who the new rulers will be. Atreides has breakfast with his mom, woman Jessica, Duke Leto's courtesan individual from the semi-strict request of the Bene Gesserit. Jessica has been attempting to show her child the extraordinary powers of her request. She tests Paul by having him attempt to force her to pass him a glass of water. Paul is just to some degree fruitful. Paul finds out about the planet Arrakis and its kin. It is the main wellspring of the psychoactive flavor, which expands life and discernment. Zest is vital for interstellar travel since it makes conceivable the extended awareness of the guides who plot quicker than light leaps, collapsing space-time to travel right away starting with one planet then on to the next. Leto Atreides, alongside warrior Cart Halleck and Mentat Thufir Hawat, get a majestic emissary who formalizes the granting of Arrakis to house Atreides. The head fears Leto's developing political power and notoriety in the Landsraad, a meeting of respectable houses. Leto perceives that his arrangement to direct Arrakis is a snare or the like, yet can't deny a majestic proposition. Paul asks his companion, the first-class warrior Duncan Idaho, to take him along when Duncan ventures out in front of time to investigate things. Duncan declines. Paul trusts that he's been having dreams about Arrakis and the Fremen, remembering one where Duncan succumbs to fight. Duncan excuses this as simply a fantasy. That's what let Paul know. Everything significant happens when we're conscious. Paul examines his desire to go to Arrakis ahead of schedule with his dad, however Leto rejects, saying that he really wants Paul close by. He makes sense of the political circumstance. The Sovereign has set up a contention between House Atreides and House Harkonnen, a conflict which will debilitate them both, to the advantage of the ruler. Leto rather plans to hit a coalition with the Fremen to outfit their desert power to his own and outsmart the head. Paul communicates his questions about his capacity to succeed, track down his direction to administration, similarly as Gurney has a sparring session with Paul, insisting that the young ducal heir must be more wary about the danger posed by the Harkonnens and more ruthless in battle. Paul begins to have dreams of Chani. Jessica's Bene Gesserit superior, Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Mohiam, arrives on Caladan to test Paul. Before the meeting he is inspected by Sook Dr. Wellington Yu, who warns Paul that the Bene Gesserit have their own agenda. Mohiam puts Paul through the test of the Gom Jabbar, using a poisoned needle and a pain-inflicting box to judge his character. After the test, Mohiam asks Paul about his dreams and whether they sometimes come true. Afterward, Mohiam berates Jessica for producing a son for Duke Leto, rather than the daughters she had been ordered to produce. She blames Jessica for feeling that her child may be the Kwisatz Haderach, the satisfaction of a Bene Gesserit messianic prediction. Jessica affirms this conviction and Mohiam cautions her that Paul's capacities are not completely evolved and that he could pass on in the approaching preliminaries. At the point when Mohiam leaves, Paul stands up to his mom about what Mohiam implied. Jessica makes sense of that the Bene Gesserit have burned through many years participated in a particular rearing system to create an unmatched psyche who can see both the past and what's in store. The Atreides show up on Arrakis. At the point when they land their boat, local people start reciting an expression Paul can't perceive. Paul asks his mom and she makes sense of that it's a nearby prediction of the Lisan al-Gaib, the voice from external world, a forecasted savior on Arrakis. Jessica says that they figure Paul may be this figure, yet Paul excuses it as simple notion spread by the Bene Gesserit. Jessica enlists a Fremen worker, Shaddam Mapes. Mapes sees Jessica and Paul as a satisfaction of the Lisan al-Gaib and gives Jessica a blade produced using the tooth of Shai Halad, the gigantic sandworms which make the desert of Arrakis so risky. That evening, while he concentrates on a holographic picture of the Muad'Dib desert mouse, Paul endures a death endeavor by a tracker searcher drone when Mapes goes into the room, diverting it. Leto reviews his new space and finds that the Harkonnens have attacked a large part of the required framework. They choose to take the issue to the magnificent judge of the change, an environmentalist named Liat Kynes, who has dwelled on Arrakis for a really long time. Duncan Idaho gets back from half a month living with the Fremen. He reports to the Duke that the Fremen are unmatched warriors who live in networks known as sietches, in sinkholes underneath the desert. Duncan affirms Thufir Hawat's conviction that the head of one of these sietches, Stilgar, has come to meet with Leto. Stilgar requests that the Outworlders not travel past the city but to mine Zest. Leto denies yet demands that the sietches will stay untouched and that Fremen won't be pursued while the Atreides rule. Paul welcomes Stilgar to remain, yet he leaves. Duncan acquaints the Atreides with some Fremen innovation, including the dampness-saving stillsuits and thumpers which are utilized to draw in sandworms. Leto's party meets with Liet Kynes to examine the flavor mining tasks. She examines their stillsuits and finds that Paul has naturally fitted his stillsuit in the Fremen way. In the local language she says, "He will know your ways as though brought into the world to them." The party flies out to notice a flavor mining activity. The mining vehicle, a sandcrawler, has drawn in a worm, which is drawn by the cadenced vibrations of the crawler as it gathers the zest. While a flying convey all neglects to eliminate the mining vehicle, Duke Leto handles his little crew of ornithopters close by to save the excavators. At the point when Paul gets out to direct the excavators inside, he is hit with a gigantic portion of zest and has a progression of dreams incorporating one of himself with Chani. He is almost sucked down into the sand with the crawler when Cart gets him and takes him on board his dad's ornithopter. The two watch as the worm's gigantic, toothed throat opens and gulps down the sandcrawler. Afterward, Paul is inspected by Dr. Yu, who illuminates Paul and his mom that the flavor is psychoactive yet shouldn't hurt Paul. Duke Leto gets up around evening time with the feeling that something is off base. He calls security yet finds no solution. He finds Mapes cut to death and is shot with a disabled dart that tunnels its direction through his body's safeguard and into his back, deadening him. Yu uncovers himself as a swindler. He has brought down the safeguards and cut off Atreides' interchanges. Cart is stirred and drives the counter-assault as the Harkonnen powers, supported by the magnificent Sardaukar troops, start their attack. The Atreides troops, got ill-equipped and dwarfed by Harkonnen troops in the Sardaukar, think of themselves as fast-wrecked. Duncan kills a few Sardaukar, takes an ornithopter and attempts to protect Paul and Jessica yet thinks that they are as of now gone. Aristocrat Vladimir Harkonnen has guaranteed the Bene Gesserit that he won't hurt Paul or Jessica, so he sends a portion of his men to take them and pass on them in the desert to pass on from openness. Paul, not completely secure in his Bene Gesserit capacities, is as yet ready to utilize the voice to arrange one of the men to eliminate his mom's gag. Jessica quickly arranges one of the men to kill his friend. At the point when she's completely liberated, she kills two of them actually. Their ornithopter accidents and Paul and Jessica see the decimation of Arrakis from a good ways. Yu uncovers to Leto that the Harkonnens got his consistence since they have his better half held hostage. He replaces one of Duke Leto's teeth with a toxin case which he trusts the Duke will use to kill the nobleman. Yu meets with Aristocrat Harkonnen and requests that the nobleman honor his part of the bargain. The aristocrat guarantees that Yu will be brought together with his significant other and afterward cuts his throat. The nobleman then brags over a deadened Leto, who clamps down on his phony tooth and ousts the toxin, killing everybody in the room with the exception of the noble who is seriously harmed. Paul keeps on having dreams from his zest openness. They are first of Chani. Notwithstanding, they rapidly change to dreams of ridiculous clash and fanatics, working underneath an Atreides banner and under Duke Leto's name, spreading across the system, like an voracious fire. Paul and Jessica are protected by Duncan Idaho, who figured out how to get away from the butcher. Duncan carries them to Kynes, who has set up in a deserted terraforming station involved by Fremen. The Sardaukar track them there in assault, with the Fremen killing a large number of them. Duncan penances himself in a point of no return to permit Paul, Jessica, and Kynes to get away. Paul and Jessica escape in an ornithopter. Paul consents to remain as Jessica's boss. Chani, who is essential for the party, shows compassion for Paul, who she accepts will bite the dust at Jamis' hand, and gives him her Kryze knife, a knife produced using the tooth of the sandworm, a second from one of Paul's dreams. In the duel, Paul beats Jamis, more than once holding a blade to his throat and requesting that he yield. Stilgar illuminates him that Fremen duels are until the very end, and Jessica says that Paul has never killed anybody. Hesitantly, Paul kills Jamis. Fulfilled, the Fremen return Paul and Jessica to their sietch. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing for more movie recaps.